Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bar. This is our first podcast with some very, very successful and very determined lawyers that have a lot to share. So we're going to start today. We're going to introduce Oksana Davydova.
Hi.
She does workers' compensation law. And we also have Emanuel Kataev, who does employment law. I'm Margarita Moshe, and I do personal injury law. And we're going to discuss a little bit today about our experiences through law school, the bar exam, and everything beyond. I'm going to start today with Oksana. Oksana, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Margarita. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome, everybody. I am a workers' compensation attorney. I've been practicing workers' compensation for about 10 years now, and I can't say every day is the same. With different cases and different fact patterns, every day is definitely interesting, to say the least. But that's, in terms of practice, I would say it does have its ups and downs. And we could discuss in terms of what I do, or we could go more into...
So Oksana, I know recently you went out on your own, maybe
Yes.
about a year and a half ago.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us a bit about that experience, why you did that, and how do you like it?
So I worked for different firms for about 9 years, and then I thought, you know what, I think it's time to be on my own. I have the experience, I have the clientele, I have the networking, and I said, why not? I will say it's a completely different type of ball game, because when you're working for an employer, you have certain things to go by. When you're working for yourself, you have 5 different hats on: admin, payroll, clients, hearings. You manage people, not just manage clients, but you're also managing a staff, and you're managing payroll and managing I feel like I put out more fires than I practice law nowadays. I'm sure Emanuel could tell you the same thing, because he's also been on his own for the past 2 years now.
Yeah, since January of 24.
Yeah.
Been a wild ride.
He could also give his experience. So you've also been, I think, a year now.
I think in general that is the goal for most attorneys, to be in practice on your own. But I'll definitely let Emanuel speak a little bit about his experience. Where did you come from, Emanuel, and what made you decide to go out on your own, and how's the experience been so far?
I've been employed in labor and employment firms, just 2 of them, ever since coming out of law school and coming admitted. I was at the Boys Law Group for a year and a half, and got some good experience there. And then I was at a firm called Melvin Mabuda for almost 10 years, and really honed in on my practice skills there. What made me take the leap was I was ready for a long time. I was just comfortable there, and I liked working there. But there came a point in time when we just had some disagreements about compensation and other things, and I realized that it was time for me to make a move. I'm happy I did it. It's broadened my horizons. It's been really fun, an exciting experience dealing with some of the things that Oksana talked about. But I think we should talk about some of the basics about how we started here.
Absolutely.
Do you remember taking the LSAT?
Oh, I certainly do remember taking the LSAT. It was a decision that I made it was very on the spur of the moment. And I did a little bit of what's different about me is that I went into law school later in life. So it was something that I always wanted to do. It was something that I always had as a goal to do. But I started out as a pharmacist, working for 16 years for myself with a pharmacy in the Bronx. And then I just decided that it was time to fulfill my long life dreams. And I decided to take the LSAT. The LSAT I took at 38 years old.
Oh, wow.
So it was not your run of the mill kind of, out of college 21-year-old. So
Just once?
I did take it just once, and I said, whatever I get, and if I get in, I get in. And I did fairly well. I got into a few schools, and then I remember I was sitting with my husband, and he's like, so what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I don't know. He's like, well, you got to go now. And I was like, well, okay. And, my kids, I was lucky. My kids were a little bit older, and they weren't, so young that I didn't have to be, with them all the time. But the LSAT in general at that age for me was a little bit harder, I think, than for most younger people, because first of all, I've been out of school for so long, and for me to kind of hone in again in the whole school kind of environment was difficult. So I started taking test masters. A friend of mine recommended it to me. And I went for 2 months. I think it was 8 weeks. I started in September, and the LSAT was in December. I remember I took it at CW Post, the LSAT. I came in, I was very relaxed. I said, you know what? I just did it. I said, whatever it is, it is. I took it. I remember seeing all these young kids with me. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm like I'm an old fart compared to everyone here. And it was very intimidating. I took all my time. There were people getting up way ahead of me, but I said, I'm taking my time. I came out of there. I was not really confident in like my score, but I said, let's see what happens. And a couple of weeks later, I got it. And I started already having my applications coming out. And, I got into a couple of schools. The closest one for me was Hofstra, and that's where I went. And, well, that was my LSAT experience, at least. How was yours?
I was under a lot of pressure when I was taking the LSAT. I was in college. I wanted to do this 3+3 program where my fourth year of college would have been my first year of law school. I needed to get this magic score of 160. So I also took test masters. I believe that was the first one I took. I studied hard, did my best, and I got this terrible score of 145. I was so disappointed because I lost out on the ability to do this 3+3 program. After that, I figured, okay, not all is lost. Let me try again. I studied hard. I went to, I believe it was Power Score and the Princeton Review, which was provided to me through a pipeline program called the Ronald H. Brown Summer Law School Prep Program. I was a participant in that, and it was a huge help because I was in St. John's Law School taking that program in order to go to St. John's Law. And I met a lot of professors there and other people who helped me along the way. It was a really great experience being there. So through studying and working hard and taking 2 more courses, I got a 154, which was a 9-point improvement. And I sort of sold myself to law schools on the fact that, look, I got this terrible score, but I worked hard and I got a 9-point improvement, which is huge. So take me in. And I really wanted to go to St. John's. I was waiting for a response from them. I got accepted to other schools, but I wasn't too crazy about them because I lived 2 blocks away from St. John's and I lived closer than most of the kids that dormed there. So when they accepted me, I walked over and I signed up, and it's history from there. But I remember taking those courses and it was really tough figuring out what you need to know in order to pass the LSAT. I think I struggled more with the LSAT than I did with the bar exam. So I think for anyone that wants to go to law school, it's very important for them to figure out the best approach for them to figure out the LSAT, because that's the key that opens the door.
Yeah, I agree.
So I agree actually a lot with what Emmanuel said. Emmanuel will probably tell you we went to college together. We were in St. John's together, and I actually took a little bit different approach. After I graduated college in 3 years, and my goal was always law school. Unfortunately, we plan, God plans better. I took the LSATs in college, and I was very like, you know what? I'm gonna do this. Let's see what happens. Very nonchalant, nothing. I didn't do so well. I don't remember if I took the study course. I don't think I took the study course until the second time I took the LSAT. And I didn't do so well. And I was like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. I applied. And when I applied, I think it was around the same time when the market crashed. And if you remember, all of Wall Street was going to law school because obviously what else was there left to do? And it became very competitive. So that score that I got, it was like around 140s or something. I don't remember. And it wasn't going to cut it, like you said. So I was like, you know what? No problem. I'll take some time. I was very devastated because I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to law school. I finished college early. The goal was to start law school early. I don't know why, but I feel like when we're younger, we're always in a rush somewhere. And so, I took 3 years off. And I worked for a law office. I was in personal injury. I worked for a doctor. I did different things, but I was studying for the LSATs. And I think I took 2 different courses. I remember I know I took Power Score and I think Test Masters as well. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. So I took the course. It was like, I think you're right, that 8 weeks. I retook the LSATs, and it is much harder than the bar exam, I think, because you don't know what to expect. My favorite part was the games, right? Because it's like you're just like figuring out. It's like a puzzle piece you could figure out. Unfortunately, I heard it's not there anymore. But I took it. I did better, significantly better, but I still wasn't happy. And I applied, and again, because I applied the following year, apparently Wall Street was still in law school or going into law school.
They were still going all of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley was working for sure. Cool.
But I was like, first, okay, let me get some real world experience. Let me get my, although I was already working for a place, let me get my feet wet. And so I took the LSAT 3 times. I was like, I'm gonna do it again. I'm like, what do I got to lose, really? I can only do better. Yeah, third time is the charm. So I took the LSAT again. I think I did significantly better, but one thing I never thought about before, but you said it, was I sold myself. How? I went to a friend of mine advised me, was a lawyer. He's like, you got to go to the school and you got to tell them why you want it, right? Because you're on paper, you're like everybody else. What makes you different? So I'm like, you know what? You're right. Because on paper, I'm like everybody else, right? There's a name, a score, your grades, and that's it. What distinguishes you from anybody else? I went to a friend of mine was like to me, go to Torah Law School. I applied. Torah was one of the places I applied because he was one of the deans that was willing to meet with me at the time. I think I called St. John's and I couldn't get a interview with anybody. So I went to Torah Law School. I went to him twice. I went to him when I took the LSAT the second time. And he's like, you know what? And he's the one who told me actually about Wall Street going into law school. And he's like, it was so competitive. Maybe you want to try it again. I'm like, no problem. I was like, I'll try it again. This is why I took it the third time. I took the LSAT the third time. I come back to him next year and I'm like, look, I took your advice. I said, I took the LSAT again. I got better. I'm determined. I will get into it. He's like, okay. And guess what? I get accepted that same year.
That's funny. I had a similar experience.
I sold myself, like you said.
I really wanted to go to St. John's, and I knew 2 efficiency deans. One of them was Robert and the other one was Dorothy. I met with both of them. I sort of poured my heart out to them. I said, look, I've always dreamed of being an attorney. I live so close by. I just dreamed to go to the school. If I get accepted, I will immediately accept, even though I have other offers. And it worked, telling them about my experience taking the LSAT, persevering over the bad score, telling them about who I am, where I'm from. A lot of attorneys in our community were from, a unique place. People don't know our culture and our background. It's not as prevalent and well known in the legal community. And so bringing that with you and setting yourself off as a minority, setting yourself apart as a minority is important. People forget Jewish people are a minority. We're less than 1% of the entire world population.
Yes.
And so I know DEI is down the tubes, but to the extent that the court, to the extent that the law school system still looks at that, it's important to set yourself apart that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, because even though I scored in the low 150s on the LSAT, I remember that they were very attracted to the fact that I wasn't just somebody coming out of college, that I had a whole career under my belt, that I was a successful business owner, a women-owned business owner. And they looked at all those factors. I remember when I met with the dean, she said, when I went to meet with the dean of Hofstra, she said, why do you think we accepted you? And I said, why? She said, it's definitely not your score. I said, okay. So she said, you're different. She says, you're different. And we want different. We want people with some kind of life experience. We want people that are diverse in their life. And you already have different objectives. You have different goals. But I will say that when I met with her, I think it was in the middle of the first semester, because for me, it was very, very difficult to go back to school after so many years. And I was also running my own business. I had my own pharmacy at the time. So I was, I went part-time. I said, let me see how this is going to work out, because I really wasn't sure how this was going to fit in the dynamic of my family life. I had 4 kids already. And I met with her like middle of the semester, and because I was like, I didn't expect this much influx of work. And it was very demanding. And I said to her, I said, I don't know if I'm going to come. I don't know if I can continue. So I would go into her office every week. I don't know if I can continue. And I'll never forget. She looks at me and she says, Margarita, shit or get off the pot. I will never forget that. I said, what? and she's like, yeah, either shit or get off the pot.
Like, I'm an expression.
She's like, I'm sick of you coming in here complaining every week that you don't know if you're going to stay. She's like, listen, you're here. You made it this far. Obviously, you can do it. Just concentrate, focus. But the next time you come in here, you better tell me, are you staying or are you going?
Right.
And I went home that day. I was talking to my husband and he's like, well, is it really that difficult? I said, it's difficult for me because I just have a lot of other responsibilities. He said, look, see how the semester is going to pan out. Finals were coming up. I said, okay, listen, I'm going to take the finals and we'll see what happens. But I remember at the end of that semester, I came to her and I said, okay, I took the shit.
That's the starter.
But I'll never forget it. She was so, so funny. And she actually, like, she really motivated me. She's like, she gave me that push to say, you're here for a reason. So why are you cutting yourself short all the time? But that was my experience in any case, with the law school.
I think, you know what it is? I don't think it matters, where you are in your life, at what a stage, and especially when, you're in law school. I feel like we all have different experiences. And I kind of agree with you, like the first semester, because law school is a different, beast, if we could call it that. It's definitely nothing like college. I mean, the way we went to law school, I graduated, 12 years ago. So 15 years ago when I started law school. And it was, at the time, I remember I learned about the Socratic method, right? They call on you however they want to call on you. Okay. And so you always have to be prepared because you never know when you're getting called. Number one. Number two, it was it was like one exam. It sets your whole grade for the more or less 80%, 70 to 80% of your grade, plus attendance and maybe, some work here and there. And then that exam, it was on a bell curve, right? So the students are all working against each other. And then when you learn that, you're like, I'm sorry, what? So yes, I understand. Because and what's interesting was I was at law school. It's like, I think there was about 3 groups, 100 or 80 to 100 in each group, right? We used to be group A, group B. It's like 300 plus kids in law school. And we had a variety. I had, the college kids fresh out of college who were like, oh my God, oh yeah, I got this. The kids who took some time off and came back like me. Then there was a lot of people like you. I remember I went to school with Margarita who this was like their second career. I remember there was a chiropractor who was in law school with me, a stay-at-home mom who just went, like, I'm doing, law school. And we had all people of different ages, different groups. And what's interesting is that you build character, right? And I was like this soon. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, how much can we read? I remember the dining room table filled with papers and case law and reviews and this and that. And you're like, how am I going to remember all of this? Where is this going to go? But you know what it is? You're 100% right. You gotta like just sit down, get your shit done, and you have no other choice. And what's interesting is that, it's so funny you said that, because I went back to the dean of admissions. I come back to him a year later. And I was like to him, listen, I was like, I want to thank you because you pushed me and, and I told you I'd prove myself. And so I come back to him. I was like, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm giving you my transfer papers because I want to switch law schools. I did so well. I gave him my transcript that I did so well that I wanted to switch law schools because I wanted to be closer to home. Torah was so far. And I ended up switching to CUNY Law School. And he was like to me, he's like, I knew you'd do well. I was like, how'd you know? He's like, because you didn't give up. You came back to me, you took the LSAT, and you kept going. I said, well, what other choices did I have, really?
It's a lot of determination here in this room, I have to say. How was your first experience in the first semester of law school, Emanuel?
I was struggling because I was focusing on helping my father with his businesses and just working and dealing with life and other situations that had to be dealt with. And it was a challenge for me to really commit myself to focusing on law school and doing well. I remember that although I did really well in college, I graduated summa cum laude with like a 3.94 GPA. I did not do nearly as well in law school. And it was a real struggle. But at the end of the day, you learn, if you finish law school, what do they call you at the end of the application process? You're an attorney. And I sort of, after finishing law school, dedicated myself to my craft and setting myself apart as someone who does a niche field that no one else really does. And it's panned out really well. I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that I've had.
So how did you decide to go into employment law? It's through that person? You had a mentor?
I did have a mentor, and what I figured out was we had this one mentor who was a prosecutor, and we were talking to him. I still remember this. We were in a bar, hanging out with him with a bunch of other law students, and we asked him, why did you decide to become a prosecutor doing criminal prosecution work? And he said, because I didn't want to be one of those boring attorneys that says, oh yeah, I do reinsurance. I want to be in a bar and I want to tell an interesting story about how somebody killed somebody and how I put him away. And that really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing with your life? And I couldn't do criminal defense work. I couldn't do prosecution work. I think that's, way beyond what I'm capable of because there's so much at stake. But employment law was such a great runner up to that because everybody works. everybody goes through the process of getting fired, and everyone needs help and advice through that situation on both sides of the coin. As an employer who doesn't want to deal with the disgruntled employee suing them, and as an employee who is, dependent on the employer for sustenance, for, putting food on the table, and now they're not working there anymore. What are they going to do? So it looked so attractive to me. People spend 33% of their lives minimum in the workforce. And it's great. I mean, the stories that I have to tell at these podcasts and at dinner tables are really fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. You must hear some really interesting stories. Can you maybe talk about one really interesting case without going into names or details that really resonated with you?
I worked on one case with a colleague, Jonathan Shalom. Him and I worked on it together. It was a really interesting case. She was an Israeli woman. She worked in a really interesting sort of a military defense contractor here in Queens, of all places. And her supervisor was this personal trainer on the side. And he was constantly harassing her.
Hmm.
He he brought like sex toys into the workplace.
Oh my.
He made inappropriate comments. He made her feel very uncomfortable. And she actually ended up coming to us while she was still employed there. And so Jonathan and I gave her the advice of recording him after complaining directly to him about his conduct. And she did. And she confronted him and she started crying during this confrontation. And because she was crying, he was constantly apologizing and admitting he was foolish and wrong to do these things. She was telling him, you're a father of daughters. How can you do this? And he did everything that he could to apologize to her and say he won't do it again. But, his conduct didn't stop. So she ended up quitting. Well, we sued. And after we sued, we went to mediation and they were denying everything.
Oh.
But we had this recording that we had got a certified transcription of and translated because it was in Hebrew.
Mm.
And we presented that translation at the mediation. And everything turned the tides after that point. We got a very favorable settlement. She was extremely happy. She went traveling with her boyfriend. And it was a happily ever after story. But we got a great result. Jonathan and I worked really hard on that case.
Wow, that's amazing. That must have made you feel really good.
It was a good outcome. Yeah, we helped her out.
Especially for a woman in that situation where you already feel so vulnerable coming forward and confronting the person and then having to be scrutinized later on and having to go through this mediation. I'm sure it wasn't easy for her either. But that smoking gun that you had definitely helped.
Yeah, the problem with these cases, it's always a he said, she said. So you have the evidence that helps. There are stories where someone makes it up and it's not true. And the Me Too movement was a huge awakening to that because a lot of people went down and they found out after the fact that it wasn't really true. But yeah, it's an interesting field. This line of work is difficult, but it's very rewarding, especially if you're on the right side of the coin.
Where's your office located now?
I operate out of 8 offices. My Manhattan office is in Times Square. I have an office in Brooklyn and 2 in Queens. I also operate in Greenville, Roslyn, New Hyde Park, and Amityville.
Oh, so you're all over. That's great to know.
And depending on where I am in court or if I have a meeting somewhere, it's helpful to be in different places, yes.
And you said sometimes people would make the stories up. Did you ever have a client that you found out that this whole story was made up? How did you deal with that situation?
Those are always difficult. The answer with those kind of situations is we should settle. And so
As soon as possible.
as soon as possible. And sometimes clients refuse to, or they feel that their case is worth $1 million when it's not. And I have these conversations early on, but there have been occasions where a client said, I'm not settling for less than $1 million. The case is going to be forced to trial, and I'm not confident that we're going to win. So I tell them with all due respect, I'm not the attorney for you. Here's your file. You can find a different attorney. You can proceed with the case yourself. Here's some tips of things you need to do along the way, but respectfully I'm out. And that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you sometimes reject a client, it either puts them in line and makes them realize, hey, you know what, maybe I'm wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
So my attorney doesn't have faith in the case and I should consider what he's saying. Or if they're truly difficult, and then they sort of either learn the hard way or perhaps they've proven me wrong, but I haven't seen that yet.
Okay, and what about to our youth right now who are all, trying to go to law school, trying to aspire, trying to figure out where they want to find themselves? Would you recommend employment law for them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think going to law school in and of itself is what I refer to as a door opener. There's so many things you could do with a law degree. You don't have to be an attorney, even if you have a law degree. It just opens up doors for you and really helps. So I think that anyone that's looking to improve their lives and do something better with their lives, going to school and getting a law degree is definitely a way to achieve that. Once you have a law degree, you meet people and you network with people, and things happen where you get taken in places that you never thought you'd be able to go.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Going from that, Margarita, I'm curious, like based on what Emmanuel said, you said you always dreamed of being a lawyer, and then you became a pharmacist and you had a very successful business and you were set. So what made you want to go to law school and become a lawyer?
For me, it was when it started all in high school. When I was in I went to Forest Hills High School, and I was in the Law and Humanities program in Forest Hills. And over the summer, I interned at a big firm. They were called Hughes, Hubbard and Reed. I interned them the whole summer, and they handled Pfizer. They handled a few pharmaceutical companies. I worked in the records department, so I get to look through all the records and put them in order and prepare them for the attorneys. And I would read through all these case files and motions, all these cases that were actually in suit from people from like the thalidomide actions from many, many years ago, in the 50s when pregnant women were taking the medications. They still have all these, suits going on. And I thought it was really, really interesting. And I had a mentor there. I came into his office one day. I said, I really like this. It's really interesting. He let me sit on all the meetings. And he said, do you really want to go to law school? I said, yeah. He said, okay, it was my senior year. He said, what are you going to major in when you go to college? And I said, probably going to do an English major. He said, wrong answer. He said, if you really like pharmaceutical law, and I was very interested at the time. He said, you need to do something that's going to set you apart from everyone else. He says, I have applicants all the time, 1 million that are lined up down the road that are English majors. And you know what? I don't want them. He says, they don't do anything for me. They might be really smart and really intelligent, determined, but they don't set themselves apart from anything else. If you really want to go into pharmaceutical law and you want to work for a big company like us, go into major in bio, major in pharmacy, major in something else. So I thought about it a lot, and I said, you know what? I think he's right. So when I applied to college, I applied to St. John's. I went to pharmacy school with the intention that I was going to go into law school right after pharmacy school. But as anyone knows, pharmacy school is expensive.
Right.
And you accumulate a lot of loans in law school. And then you come out and you're hungry to work. You're like, you wanna make some money, you wanna work, you wanna
Sell some drugs.
you wanna sell some drugs.
Legal drugs.
You wanna just get out there. You're tired of school, you wanna work and you wanna see some reward come in. So I said, okay, I worked for a couple of chains. I worked for Genovese, Eckerd, I think Rite Aid. And I was like, oh my God, this is so boring. And I remember a year or two in, I had 2 kids already, and I said, I'm gonna take the LSAT. I took the LSAT at that time, and I didn't do so great. I was maybe 25 years old, I think. And I said, okay, maybe this isn't the right time for me. I was pregnant at the time when I took it, and I said, I just had too much going on. And, my husband came to me with an idea because my husband is like the businessman of businessmen, and he's always got some crazy ideas. He's like, why don't you just open a pharmacy and go work and see how you like it and you can figure it out. I said, okay. I didn't know the first thing about running a pharmacy, but I was just kind of thrown in there. I opened my first store in the Bronx. I worked there for 16 years, and I woke up and I'm like, what am I doing here still? Oh my God, why am I still here? I was doing very well. Financially, the business was good and everything like that. But I just I didn't want to do this anymore. I remember we were in Miami in the beach, and he's like, what's wrong with you? My husband says to me, I said, I'm bored. And he said, so what do you want to do? I said, I always wanted to go to law school. He said, so just do it already. You keep talking about it. And it was just something inside of me. I don't know if I needed to prove it to myself that I could or that I would. And I said, and that was my aha moment. I said, you know what, I'm going to take the LSAT. So that was, the journey for me.
So now I'm curious. Are you still bored as a lawyer now?
No, I'm definitely not bored.
No. So I want to know what made you go from pharmaceutical law that you were thinking about. Obviously, we know why you became a pharmacist, and now you're a personal injury attorney. Why the sudden shift?
So I have that medical background under
Right.
my belt. So I wanted to use it. And I said personal injury is as close to, medical background. You need a lot of medical background to really like understand people injuries and also like sympathize with them on a medical level. But, pharmaceutical law was probably not going to be in the cards for me already at that age, because a lot of the people start a lot younger than I do. So, it was just I said I think personal injury is going to be the right movement for me to make, because of the medical background that you needed, or that I had. And I think that it gives me like a little bit of a heads up as far as, other personal injuries attorneys who do educate themselves. I have to say they've been very good about educating themselves with injuries and anatomy and all these things that are involved with people who we are in catastrophic incidents. But I think that it gives me a little bit of an edge.